My brother, Gary, had been stealing from me for months. When I confronted him, he just smirked. My friends told me to let it go, and my own property manager said he couldn't be evicted. So I didn't argue. I just called my lawyer and set a trap they never saw coming. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The cursor on my screen blinked, a steady, rhythmic pulse of digital indifference. It was 1:15 a.m. on a Tuesday, and the blue light from my 3 monitors was the only thing illuminating my home office. Outside, rain lashed against the windows, a miserable percussion that matched the throbbing in my temples. I'd been working for 16 hours straight, fueled by ginger tea and the sheer, agonizing pressure of tax season. As a certified public accountant, the first quarter of the year wasn't just busy, it was a siege. My body ached, a deep, bone-weary exhaustion that had become my constant companion. I was in the middle of reconciling a complex corporate account when a notification popped up from my own bank. It was an automated fraud alert, flagging a transfer I'd supposedly made an hour ago. That's impossible, I thought, my fingers freezing over the keyboard. I'd been chained to this desk. I clicked open my personal statement, my stomach tightening. It wasn't the first alert I'd gotten. Over the past few months, there had been a few, all for small, odd amounts that I had brushed off as subscription services I'd forgotten to cancel or automated business expenses. I was meticulous with my clients' money, but in the fog of work, my own finances had been on autopilot. Now, seeing the 1:00 a.m. transfer, a chill snaked down my spine. I ran a filter. Transfers last 90 days. The list that populated the screen made my breath catch. Dozens of them. $150 here, $300 there, $275, small enough to fly under the radar of a busy professional, but when I highlighted the column, the total at the bottom of my screen stared back at me like an accusation. $17,450. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't an oversight, this was theft. I scrolled through the transaction IDs, my mind racing. Then I saw it, a recipient code. A simple alphanumeric string I'd set up years ago as a shortcut. I knew it as well as my own name. It was the identifier for the joint savings account I shared with my younger brother, Gary, an account I'd set up to help him build credit, which I was the sole contributor to. But these transfers weren't to that account. They were from my primary checking, routed through that joint account, and then somewhere else. He was using the shared account as a bridge, a digital laundry to muddy the waters. The room suddenly felt cold, the exhaustion evaporating into a sharp, vibrating shock. Gary, my baby brother. The one I'd practically raised after our parents passed. The one I let live in my second property, a condo downtown, for a family rent that was barely a suggestion when I hadn't even bothered to collect for the last 6 months. My first thought was that he was in trouble. Gambling again? Debt? I grabbed my phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed him. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. A third time the same. Panic gave way to a cold, creeping dread. I pulled on a coat over my pajamas, grabbed my keys, and walked out into the storm. The drive to his condo was a blur of slick roads and the rhythmic thwack-thwack of the windshield wipers. When I got there, I didn't bother buzzing. I used my master key to the building and let myself into his unit. The smell hit me first, expensive perfume and what smelled like champagne. The lights were on. In the living room, surrounded by shopping bags from brands I couldn't afford, sat Gary, 36 years old and looking like he didn't have a care in the world. Beside him, curled up on the new, cream-colored sofa I definitely hadn't bought, was his new girlfriend, Victoria. She was a lifestyle influencer, whatever that meant, and she was draped in a silk robe, holding a glass of champagne. "Sam," Gary said, not standing up. He sounded annoyed, not concerned. "It's like 2 in the morning, what's wrong?" "What's wrong?" I repeated, my voice shaking. I held up my phone, the bank statement glowing on the screen. "You've stolen $17,000 from me, Gary. That's what's wrong." Victoria let out a little bored sigh. Gary's expression didn't change. He didn't look guilty or scared or even surprised. He just looked at me. He sipped his champagne, set the glass down, and then, slowly, a smirk spread across his face. "You always had enough to share, sis," he said, his voice smooth and cold. "What's the big deal?" I just stared at him, the rain dripping from my coat onto the plush new rug. The betrayal was worse than the theft itself. The smirk, that's what I couldn't get out of my head. It wasn't the impulsive act of a desperate man in trouble. It was the casual arrogance of someone who believes they are entitled to what you have, someone who believes you are a resource, not a relative. The condo, once a symbol of my affection and support, now felt like a crime scene. The air, thick with the scent of their celebration, choked me. "What's the big deal?" My voice was barely a whisper. I looked from Gary's smug face to Victoria, who was examining her fingernails with profound disinterest. "Honestly, Samantha," Victoria chimed in, her voice a lazy drawl. "You're a CPA. You probably write that much off in office supplies. Gary's launching a new brand. It takes capital to build an empire, you know." "An empire?" I was baffled. "What empire? Gary, you told me you were working on a tech startup. This is theft." "It's seed money, Sam," Gary said, finally standing up. He was wearing a cashmere sweater I recognized because I'd seen it in a department store window last week for $800. He walked over to me, but not an apology. It was a power move, crowding my space. "You're my sister. You're supposed to support me. Instead, you hoard all this money, all these properties. It's not fair." "Not fair?" I felt a hysterical laugh bubble in my throat. "I work, Gary. I work 16-hour days. I earned this. The roof you're standing under, I earned that. The money in your glass, I earned that too." "Exactly," he said, as if I'd made his point for him. "You have so much, and I have nothing. You're supposed to be my family. Family helps each other." "This isn't help, Gary. This is a felony." He rolled his eyes and the smirk returned, this time laced with pity. "Don't be so dramatic. It's just money. You'll make more." He put his arm around Victoria. "Now, if you don't mind, we were in the middle of something. You can see yourself out." I stood there for a long moment, frozen. The brother I knew, the one I'd taken to baseball games and helped with his homework, was gone. In his place was this cold, preening stranger, shaped and hardened by the equally cold woman beside him. I turned without another word and walked out, the click of the deadbolt locking behind me echoing in the empty hallway. I didn't sleep. I went home, sat at my desk, and drank cold coffee as the sun came up, the rain finally subsiding. My initial shock was calcifying into a cold, hard rage. The exhaustion was gone, replaced by an adrenaline I hadn't felt in years. He was right about one thing. I was a CPA, and I was meticulous. At 9:00 a.m. on the dot, I called my property management company. I owned the condo, but I paid a firm to manage the buildings day to day, to keep a professional distance. "Tom, it's Samantha," I said, my voice clipped. "I need you to start eviction proceedings for Unit 7B immediately." Tom, a man I'd worked with for years, was silent for a beat. "7B, that's your brother, isn't it? What's the cause?" "Non-payment of rent, for starters," I said. "But more importantly, I have documented proof of criminal activity. Theft." "Oh," Tom said, his voice lowering. "Okay, Samantha, that's heavy. Let me look at the file." I heard him typing. "Ah, here's the problem. You never had him sign a formal lease. It's all been a verbal month to month. Well, it's a family arrangement. And he's been there for 4 years." "Yes, what's the problem?" "The problem," Tom sighed, "is that he's not a standard tenant. He's family with a long-established residency and a history of you forgiving rent. He has established tenant-at-will rights. We can't just evict him, not even for non-payment, without a very long, formal process. We're talking months, maybe longer, especially if he fights it." "But the theft," I insisted, "doesn't that void everything?" "You'd think so," Tom said, clearly uncomfortable. "But without a signed lease that specifies illegal activity as grounds for immediate termination, And with him being family, the courts here are very lenient. They'll see it as a family dispute, not a landlord-tenant issue. They'll tell you to take it to civil court. My hands are tied, Samantha. We can't evict him. Not yet, not like this. I hung up the phone, the world tilting. I couldn't throw my own brother out of my own apartment, even as he was actively stealing from me. I felt utterly powerless. Desperate for an ally, I called my two oldest friends, Karen and Lisa, on a group chat. I'd known them since college. They were my rocks. I laid it all out, the late-night discovery. The $17,000, the smirk, the girlfriend, the eviction problem. I finished, expecting outrage on my behalf. There was a long silence. Finally, Karen spoke. Wow, Sam, that's a lot, but 17,000? I mean, it's terrible, but are you sure you want to make him homeless over it? He's your brother. I was stunned. He stole from me, Karen. I know, IK. Now, Lisa chimed in, her voice gentle. But you know, Gary, he's always been irresponsible. And you, well, you have so much. You just bought that new car, right? Maybe you should just let it go. Change your bank passwords, cut him off, but evicting him? That's so. Final. It's just money, Sam. You can't replace your only brother. I stared at the phone. You're siding with him. We're not siding with anyone, Karen said, suddenly defensive. We just don't want to see you tear your family apart. Think about what your parents would want. Just let it go. He'll learn his lesson when the money runs out. The betrayal was now absolute. First my brother and now my friends. They saw me as an endless, emotionless resource, a walking bank account. They saw my hard-won success not as something I'd built, but as a public well they could all drink from. I didn't argue, I didn't yell, I just stopped. A profound, icy calm settled over me. You're right, I said, my voice flat. It's a family matter, I have to go. I ended the call before they could reply. I sat in my office, the morning light now streaming in, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. They were all wrong. It wasn't just money. It was my work, my time, my trust, my life. And they had all forgotten one crucial thing about me. I wasn't just a sister. I was an accountant. And I kept impeccable records. For the rest of the day, I was numb. I canceled my client calls, citing a migraine. The silence of my house was a heavy blanket. Every tick of the clock was a reminder of the conversation with my friends, their easy dismissal of my pain. Just let it go. The words echoed, layered over Gary's smirk. They thought I was overreacting. They saw me as the responsible one, the fixer, which I now realized was just a polite term for the family doormat. My mind drifted back, as if pulling at a thread to see what would unravel. I thought about our parents. They had passed away far too young, in a car accident when I was 22 and Gary was just 16. I had just graduated, just started my first job at a small accounting firm. Suddenly, I was an orphan and a guardian, all at once. Gary was heartbroken, a rebellious teenager lashing out at the world. I became his anchor. I put my own grief on hold, put my own life on pause. While my friends were going out, dating, and traveling, I was attending high school parent-teacher conferences. I was teaching my brother how to shave. I was making sure he did his homework, that he ate, that he knew he wasn't alone. I paid for his first car. I paid for his community college applications 3 times for 3 different schools he dropped out of. I co-signed for his first apartment, and when he was evicted for noise complaints, I let him move in with me. When I finally started my own firm and bought my first duplex, I saw it as the perfect solution. I would live in one unit and Gary could live in the other. It was a failure. He treated it like a frat house. When I finally saved enough to buy the downtown condo building, I moved him there, hoping distance would force him to mature. I set the family rent at $400 a month, just to teach him responsibility. I hadn't seen a dime of it in half a year. All those sacrifices, all those late nights, first building my career to support us, then building my business to secure our future. I had done it all for him, for the memory of our family, and he had taken that devotion and lit it on fire just to warm his hands. And then there was her, Victoria. She had slithered into his life about 3 months ago. I'd only met her twice. The first time was at a family dinner I'd tried to host. She had arrived an hour late, smelling of expensive perfume, and had spent the entire evening taking photos of my food for her followers. Dee looked around my home, not with admiration, but with a calculating gaze like an appraiser. "This is a lovely house, Samantha," she'd said, tapping a manicured finger on my quartz countertop. "It's amazing what you can get when what is it? A bookkeeper." "A CPA," I'd corrected, smiling tightly. "I own my own firm." "Oh, right," she'd smiled, a flash of white teeth. "So you must have assets." It was the way she said it, assets, that had made my skin crawl. It wasn't a question, it was a confirmation. The second time was when Gary had called me, asking for a small business loan of $10,000. He had some vague idea about a dropshipping business for high-end men's grooming products. I could hear Victoria in the background, coaching him. "Tell her it's an investment, babe. Tell her she'll get equity." I knew a bad investment when I saw one. I also knew my brother. "Gary," I'd said firmly, "I'm not giving you $10,000, but I will sit down with you, help you draft a real business plan, and we can go over your projections. I'll help you do it the right way." "You know what, Sam?" he'd snapped, his voice suddenly cold. "Victoria was right. You don't want to see me succeed, you just want to control me." Dee hung up. Looking back, I realized that conversation was the turning point. That must have been when they decided that if I wouldn't give them the money, they would simply take it. She wasn't just his girlfriend, she was his co-conspirator. She was the one fanning the flames of his entitlement, validating his resentment, and pointing him like a weapon at the one person who had ever supported him, me. She saw me as a dragon sitting on a hoard of gold, and she'd convinced my brother he was the rightful heir. The numbness in my chest hardened. This wasn't just Gary being irresponsible. This wasn't a mistake. This was a calculated, malicious betrayal orchestrated by two people who saw my kindness as weakness. My friends were wrong. My parents wouldn't have wanted this. They wouldn't have wanted me to enable a thief to be a victim in my own life. They would have wanted me to be strong. I looked at the clock. 3:00 p.m. The fog of emotion was gone. My mind was sharp, clear, and cold. I picked up my phone. I didn't call my friends. I didn't call Gary. I scrolled through my contacts to Dee and pressed the name. "Davies and Associates, how may I help you?" "Hello, Janet," I said, my voice steady for the first time all day. "It's Samantha. I need to schedule an immediate, urgent meeting with Mr. Davies. It's regarding a trust and potential malfeasance." "Yes, I'll hold." Mr. Davies was a man who embodied the concepts of billable hours and old-world gravitas. He was in his late 60s, with a shock of white hair and a preference for three-piece suits. He had been my parents' lawyer, and he was the one who had helped me set up my business and my trusts. He was, to put it simply, a shark, and I was finally ready to let him hunt. I sat in his mahogany-paneled office the next morning, a thick binder in my lap. I had been up all night, but this time I wasn't processing quarterly reports. I was auditing my own life. "He smirked, Mr. Davies," I finished, after laying out the entire story. "He smirked, and my friends told me to let it go." Mr. Davies steepled his fingers, his face impassive. He hadn't interrupted me once. He just listened, his sharp blue eyes fixed on mine. "Samantha," he said, his voice calm and resonant, "first, let's establish facts. Your friends are fools. This is not a family squabble. This is grand theft. Second, the property manager is correct that a traditional eviction is difficult, but," he leaned forward, "Gary is not a traditional tenant, and you are not a traditional landlord." "What do you mean?" He tapped the binder I had brought. "You're a CPA, Samantha. You're organized. What did you bring me?" "Everything," I said, sliding it across the desk. "I've run a full trace. He used the joint account as a pass-through. The money went to a new corporate account." I passed him the printout. "Registered to G&V Enterprises, LLC, Gary and Victoria." I pulled their incorporation documents, their public record. They list the condo, my condo, as their official place of business. A small, thin smile touched Mr. Davies' lips. "Good, what else?" "They're not building a brand." They're funding a lifestyle. I've cross-referenced the debit card transactions from that LLC with Victoria's social media posts. She's meticulous about tagging. This $2,800 charge, it matches the deposit for a pop-up event at a downtown club posted 2 weeks ago. This $4,500 charge, a weekend at a spa resort. She posted a thank you to Gary for the surprise getaway. And these, I said, sliding over another sheet, are all from high-end boutiques on the same street. She's been posting hauls of her new bags and shoes, thanking her amazing man for investing in her brand. He's not just stealing, Samantha, Mr. Davies said, looking over the pages. He's liquidating your assets and she's advertising it. The sheer arrogance is breathtaking. So what can we do? I asked, my voice tight. If I can't evict him and the police will call this a civil matter, what's left? That's where they've made their critical mistake, Mr. Davies said. He stood and walked to a tall file cabinet. They, like your friends, have forgotten who you are. They think you're just sis. They've forgotten your professional designation. But more importantly, they've forgotten this. He pulled out a thick, leather-bound portfolio and placed it on the desk. The Northwood Family Revocable Trust. I vaguely remembered it. Our parents had set it up. After they passed, Mr. Davies had helped me restructure it. My properties, including the condo building, weren't just in my name. They were the primary assets of the trust. Your parents were smart, Mr. Davies said, opening the document. I was just the architect. You, Samantha, are the sole trustee. Your brother, Gary, is a named beneficiary. He is entitled to certain benefits. Conditionally. Mr. Davies put on his reading glasses and pointed to a paragraph. Article 4, Section 2B, the bad faith clause, also known as a nolo contendere or in terrorem clause. It states, and I quote, should any named beneficiary commit a malicious act, including but not limited to fraud, theft, or vexatious litigation against the trust or the acting trustee. He paused, looking at me over his glasses. Go on, I whispered. Said beneficiary shall be deemed to have acted in bad faith, and all their rights, titles, and interests associated with this trust shall be immediately and irrevocably forfeited. My breath caught. What does that mean, in plain English? It means, Mr. Davies said, a distinct note of satisfaction in his voice, that Gary thinks he's a tenant in his sister's apartment. He is not. He is a beneficiary residing in a trust asset, a privilege granted by the trustee. By stealing from you, the trustee, he hasn't just broken the law, he has violated the trust. He has triggered Article 4. He closed the heavy binder with a soft thud. He doesn't own half the apartment. He doesn't have tenant-at-will rights. He has nothing. The moment he stole that first dollar, he forfeited his entire stake in your parents' legacy. A wave of dizziness hit me, a strange mix of vindication and profound sadness. This was the clever trap I had been looking for. It wasn't even a trap I had set. It was one my parents had, as if they knew all those years ago what their son was capable of. So what's our next move? I asked. We don't go to landlord-tenant court. We don't go to the police. Yet, we call a formal meeting of the trust. He picked up his phone. Janet, please get a forensic accountant on the line. I need a certified audit of Ms. Samantha's accounts, stat. And then, please draft a formal summons for Mr. Gary and his business partner, Ms. Victoria. I'd like to invite them for a meeting to discuss the future of G&V Enterprises. For the first time in days, I let myself breathe. The shift was complete. I was no longer a victim. I was the trustee, and court was officially in session. The next 3 days were a masterclass in strategic precision. While I waited for the meeting, I became a ghost. I didn't answer Gary's texts, a few dismissive messages that showed up when he presumably noticed his new seed money account wasn't being refilled. I didn't answer my friends' calls, which had dwindled to a few half-hearted "you okay?" texts. I let them all sit in the silence. Instead, I worked. I worked with Mr. Davies. I worked with the forensic accountant he'd hired, a sharp woman named Mrs. Patel, who turned my binder of amateur sleuthing into an ironclad, 40-page report, complete with signed affidavits from my bank. Every stolen dollar was itemized, dated, and traced. The summons was delivered by a courier to the condo. It was brilliant in its vagueness. You are hereby summoned to a mandatory beneficiary meeting to discuss the status of the Northwood Family Trust and the assets therein, including the property at 125B Main Street, Unit 7B. Gary, no doubt seeing the words beneficiary and assets, must have thought this was his big moment. He probably assumed my tantrum was over and I was ready to negotiate, or, even better, that I was so beaten down by my friends. Let it go, advice that I was prepared to give him more. The day of the meeting, I dressed with purpose, not in my usual work attire of blazers and sensible flats. I wore a sharp, black sheath dress, heels, and the pearls my mother had left me. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a tired, overworked sister. I saw the trustee. I arrived at Mr. Davies' office 30 minutes early. Mrs. Patel was already there, setting up a projector. The conference room was large and imposing with a long, polished oak table. We sat on one side. Mr. Davies, me, Mrs. Patel. 3 empty chairs sat on the other. At 10:02 a.m., the door opened and they walked in. Gary was wearing a new suit, a size too tight, and looked smug. Victoria was on his arm, dressed in a bright red dress, her phone already in her hand as if she might film this negotiation. They looked less like beneficiaries and more like a poorly cast reality TV duo. "Samantha, Mr. Davies," Gary said, striding in and taking the center seat. "Glad we could finally sit down and be adults about this." Victoria giggled. "Gary, be nice. She's obviously been very emotional." I said nothing. I just looked at Mr. Davies. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Gary, Ms. Victoria," Mr. Davies began, his voice pure ice. "We have a few items on the agenda. We will begin with a formal audit presentation. Mrs. Patel." Mrs. Patel nodded, and the projector whirred to life. The first slide was a simple title, Forensic Audit of Unauthorized Transfers. Gary's smirk faltered. "What is this? I thought we were here to talk about the trust." "We are," Mr. Davies said. "Please hold your questions until the end." For the next 10 minutes, Mrs. Patel walked them through every single transaction, every transfer, every date, every corresponding charge from the G&V Enterprises account, the $800 cashmere sweater, the $4,500 spa weekend, the $2,800 club deposit, the $1,200 for a set of luggage Victoria had posted on her social media 2 days ago with the caption, "Getting ready for our next big adventure." Boss life. With each slide, Victoria's face paled. The color drained from Gary's. The smugness was replaced by a twitchy, rodent-like panic. "The grand total of misappropriated funds," Mrs. Patel concluded, clicking to the final slide, "is $51,327.8. Gary slammed his hand on the table. "This is ridiculous. It's a setup. That was seed money. Samantha gave me that money." "Did she?" Mr. Davies asked mildly. "We have a sworn affidavit from her stating she did not. We also have the bank's fraud report. But that is, for the moment, beside the point." "What do you mean, beside the point?" Gary blustered, trying to regain control. "This is a family matter. You can't audit me. So what? It's my money, too, that condo, the trust. Our parents left it to both of us. So I took my half a little early. Big deal. Just take it out of my half of the apartment when you sell it." This was it, the moment. I leaned forward, my voice low and clear. "That's where you're wrong, Gary. You don't have a half." Gary laughed, a high-pitched, nervous sound. "What are you talking about? Of course I do. It's our family trust." Mr. Davies slid a single, leather-bound document across the table. It was the trust. He had it tabbed to Article 4. "Please read Article 4, Section 2B, Mr. Gary," Mr. Davies instructed. Gary stared at it, his lips moving silently. I watched his eyes scan the page, then scan it again, the comprehension dawning with agonizing slowness. What is this?" he stammered, looking at Victoria, who was now staring at him with open horror. I don't understand this lawyer talk. Allow me to translate, Mr. Davies said, standing. It's a bad faith clause. It means that the moment you stole from the trustee, your sister, you violated the terms of the trust. It means that all your rights, titles, and interests are, and I quote, immediately and irrevocably forfeited. He let the words hang in the dead, silent air. You're lying, Victoria whispered, her voice shaking. She was looking at Gary. Tell me he's lying, Gary. This is a trick, Gary shouted, his face purple. You can't do this. I'll sue you both. I'll tell everyone what she did. Sued for what? Mr. Davies asked, unfazed. For enforcing the legal document your parents created? And what will you tell everyone? That you are a thief and that your actions had consequences. Please be my guest. We have a police report filed and ready to go. Gary shot to his feet, his chair scraping violently. You bitch, he spat at me. After everything I did, after everything. No, wait, he was sputtering. You're bluffing, this isn't real. It is very real, Mr. Gary, Mr. Davies said. You are no longer a beneficiary of the Northwood Family Trust. You are no longer entitled to any of its assets, which brings us to our final point. He nodded to me. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a single envelope. I slid it across the table. As you are no longer a beneficiary, I said, my voice as cold and hard as steel, you are no longer a resident. You are a trespasser. That is a formal summary eviction notice. You have 24 hours to vacate my property. The explosion was immediate. It wasn't the articulate rage of a wronged man. It was the incoherent, screeching tantrum of a child who'd had his favorite toy taken away. 24 hours, Gary shrieked, his face a blotchy red. You can't do that. I have rights. I'll call the police. I'll call Tom at the management company. He said you couldn't evict me. He was right, I said calmly. Your sister couldn't evict you under tenant law, but I am not your sister. I am the trustee. And the trustee has a legal and fiduciary duty to remove a hostile entity from a trust asset. You are a hostile entity, Gary. The police have already been notified. A copy of this eviction order, signed by a judge this morning, is being posted on your door as we speak. If you are not out by 10:00 a.m. tomorrow, you will be removed for trespassing. Victoria, who had been frozen, finally snapped, but her anger wasn't directed at me. It was aimed at Gary. You idiot, she hissed, grabbing her purse. You told me you owned half. You told me she was just a glorified bookkeeper. You didn't tell me it was all in some trust. You didn't tell me she could cut you out. Babe, wait, Gary stammered, his panic escalating as his primary ally turned on him. She's bluffing. We can fight this. Fight it with what, Gary? Victoria. A shot back, her voice dripping with contempt. The money's gone. That last spa weekend, that was it. You said she'd just refill the account. You said she always lets it go. He had no answer. Victoria looked at me, then at Mr. Davies, then back at the audit on the screen. The calculation in her eyes was chilling. She was cutting her losses. I had nothing to do with this, she said, her voice suddenly small and shaky, a performance for our benefit. He told me it was his inheritance. He lied to me. She ran out of the room, not a single backwards glance at the man she'd been calling her king just days before. Gary stared at the empty doorway, his entire world having evaporated in under 15 minutes. The fight went out of him like air from a balloon. He slumped back into the chair, a 36-year-old man who looked, for the first time, truly pathetic. Sammy, he whispered, using the childhood name I hadn't heard in years. Sammy, please, I messed up, I know, but don't do this. I'll have nowhere to go. I'll be homeless. You can't. I looked at him, feeling nothing. The deep well of sisterly affection I had nursed for decades had finally, decisively, run dry. The Sammy he was appealing to was the 22-year-old girl who had sacrificed everything for him. She was gone. In her place was a 42-year-old woman who was done being a doormat. No, Gary, I said, gathering my files. You did this. You made your choice when you took that first dollar. You confirmed it when you smirked. You can't steal a person's roof and then ask them for shelter. But the money, he pleaded, his eyes wide. The $51,000, I don't have it. I can't pay it back. Please, Sam, just let it go. We can forget all this. I'll get a job, I promise. That, Mr. Davies interjected, stepping forward, is what we're here to discuss. He placed another document in front of Gary. This is a civil suit. We are suing you and G&V Enterprises for the full $51,327.8 plus legal fees. We have already placed a lien on all known assets. Assets? What assets? I have nothing. You have a new $800 cashmere sweater, I said. You have a new sofa. You have an incorporated LLC. And your ex-partner, I continued, has about $10,000 worth of new bags, shoes, and luggage, all purchased with stolen funds. We will be pursuing those as well. Gary's head dropped into his hands. You're going to sue Victoria too. We are suing for the return of stolen property, Mr. Davies clarified. Whoever is in possession of that property is irrelevant. You can, of course, choose to fight this in court, but Mrs. Patel's audit is ironclad. And with the police report for the theft, a judge will not be sympathetic. Or. Gary looked up, a desperate, tiny flicker of hope in his eyes. Or what? Or you can sign this, Mr. Davies said, sliding a final paper over. A confession of judgment. You admit to the debt in full. You agree to a wage garnishment plan to be determined by the court for the rest of your life or until the debt is paid. In exchange, we will recommend to the DA that they not pursue criminal charges. You'll have a civil judgment against you, which will destroy your credit, but you will likely stay out of jail. And, I added, you will sign a permanent restraining order, agreeing to never contact me, my business, or my friends again. Your friends, he scoffed, even in his defeat. They told you to let this go. They did, I said, and I'm handling that. But this order will ensure you can't go crying to them, trying to use them to get to me. It's over, Gary, all of it. He stared at the paper. Jail or a lifetime of debt, eviction or a criminal record. These were the only choices left. He had pushed me and pushed me, assuming the well of my forgiveness was bottomless. He had just hit the bottom. He reached for the pen, his hand shaking so badly he could barely hold it. You always were the cold-hearted one, Sam, he whispered, a final, pathetic attempt to wound me. No, Gary, I said, standing and smoothing my dress. I was always the responsible one. You just never understood what that meant. He signed the paper. Mr. Davies and Mrs. Patel witnessed it. The trap was sprung. The case was closed. The next morning at 10:01 a.m., I stood on the sidewalk across from the condo building. It was a bright, clear day. The storm from the week before was a distant memory. A large, white moving van was parked at the curb. Gary was hauling boxes of his things out, his movements sullen and slow. There was no sign of Victoria. He was completely, utterly alone. A locksmith's van was parked behind him, a man I had hired. Mr. Davies was there, too, standing by the building's entrance, holding a clipboard, observing to ensure the court order was followed. I watched as Gary struggled with the new sofa, the one he and Victoria had lounged on. He couldn't get it through door. After a few minutes of pathetic shoving, he gave up, abandoning it in the lobby. He came out with a duffel bag, threw it in the back of the van, and slammed the door. He looked around, his eyes scanning the street. He saw me. I didn't wave, I didn't smile. I just stood, my arms crossed, watching. He glared at me, his face a mask of impotent rage. He got in the van and peeled out, running a red light as he sped away. Mr. Davies gave me a short, professional nod. The locksmith went inside. It was over. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I just felt empty. I had one. I had protected myself, but I had lost my brother. The last piece of my original family was gone, severed by his own greed and my necessary response. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, coordinating the cleaners to fumigate the condo, arranging for the abandoned sofa to be donated. That evening, I was sitting in my office, staring at the same blinking cursor from a week ago when my phone buzzed. It was a group text from Karen and Lisa. "Hey Sam, we're all at the bistro. Where are you? We miss you. Let's talk this Gary thing out. Drinks on us." The casualness of it, the smiley face, after they had so thoroughly dismissed my pain, it broke the dam. The emptiness filled with a clean, cold anger. This was the other betrayal, the one I hadn't dealt with. "I'll be right there," I texted back. I didn't change. I drove to the restaurant, the same one we'd been going to for a decade. I saw them through the window, sitting at our usual booth, laughing and sharing a bottle of wine. I walked in. "Sam," Karen said, her face bright. "Oh, thank God, we were so worried. Sit, sit, I ordered you a Cabernet." I didn't sit. I stood at the end of the table. "I can't stay," I said. Their smiles faded. "Oh," Lisa said, her voice laced with that gentle, placating tone I now loathed. "Sam, honey, don't be like this. We know you're upset. But we talked about it, and we really feel that if you just—" "Gary is gone," I said, my voice cutting through the restaurant's murmur. A few nearby tables turned to look. "Gone, what do you mean?" Karen asked. "Did he leave town?" "I evicted him," I said. "This morning. I also served him with a civil suit for the $51,000 he stole, and I have a restraining order against him. He will be paying me back, with interest, for a very long time. He is out of my life, for good." They stared at me, their wine glasses frozen halfway to their lips. They looked shocked, as if they couldn't believe I'd actually done anything. You evicted him," Lisa whispered, horrified. "But he's your brother, where will he go?" "I don't know," I said. "And for the first time in my life, I truly do not care. That is no longer my problem." "Samantha, that's so cold," Karen said, shaking her head. "I can't believe you do that, over money." And that was it, the final break. "You're right," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "It is cold. I learned it from him, but I learned something from you too." "From us?" "Yes, you both told me to let it go. You told me it's just money. You dismissed my pain, my work, and my trust because it was easier for you. You didn't want to deal with my drama. You wanted me to be the same old, reliable Sam, the one who just absorbs the damage and pays for the wine." "That's not fair," Karen protested, her voice rising. "It's not," I agreed. "It's not fair that I was the only one expected to be responsible. It's not fair that my brother saw me as a bank, and my best friends saw me as a therapist who should also know when to shut up. You weren't my friends this week. You were his enablers. You were just another voice telling me that my feelings didn't matter, and I'm done with that." I reached into my purse and pulled out 3 $20 bills. I placed them on the table. "That's for my share of the wine I'm not drinking," I said. "I'm letting it go, just like you suggested, all of it. You, him, the entire just let Sam handle it club." I turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving them in stunned, open-mouthed silence. As the door swung shut behind me, I didn't feel empty anymore. I felt light. I had cleaned out both of my houses. The condo was empty, and my life was finally, blessedly, free of its most toxic tenants. The climax wasn't just evicting Gary. It was evicting the idea that I owed the world my silence and my suffering. The weeks that followed were quiet. The silence was strange at first, almost unnerving. My phone, once a constant barrage of Gary's emergencies and my friends' casual demands, was now still. I'd go hours without a text. I dove back into my work, but it felt different. I wasn't working to support anyone anymore. I wasn't working to fix or save. I was just working. For me. I finished tax season with a clarity and focus I hadn't had in years. I took the $5,000 I'd been saving for Gary's next business and booked a flight to Italy, a solo trip, something I'd put off for 20 years. Mr. Davies handled the fallout. As predicted, Victoria disappeared completely, deleting her social media and likely moving on to her next victim. She never responded to the civil summons. Mr. Davies, using the confession of judgment Gary had signed, began the process. He's found a job, Mr. Davies reported to me over the phone a month later. I was in my kitchen, drinking coffee and looking out at my garden. He's working at a call center. The garnishment will begin with his first paycheck. At the court-mandated rate, you will be repaid in, approximately 23 years. I laughed, a real actual laugh. Good, that's good, Mr. Davies. And the restraining order is in full effect, he added. As for the civil suit against Ms. Victoria's assets, we've managed to retrieve the luggage from a pawn shop she'd hawked it at. It's a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. It's more than I expected, I said. Thank you for everything. You did the hard work, Samantha, he said kindly. You just needed someone to remind you that your signature is more powerful than your guilt. We hung up and I felt a sense of peace settle over me. It wasn't about the money, it was about the principle. The garnishment, the tiny payments trickling in over decades, was a permanent, legal acknowledgement of the wrong he had done. It was accountability, etched in stone. As for Karen and Lisa, they tried. A few texts. We're sorry. We miss you. It was a misunderstanding. But the trust was gone as surely as the money in my bank account had been. The foundation was cracked. I sent them both a polite, final message. I wish you both well, but I need to move forward. Goodbye. I blocked their numbers. The condo, now cleaned and repainted, felt new. I stood in the empty living room, the late afternoon sun streaming in. The ghost of the ugly sofa and the smell of cheap champagne were gone. It just smelled like fresh paint and possibility. I'd already signed a lease with a new tenant, a young doctor starting her residency. She had passed the credit check with flying colors. That evening, I was packing for my trip, a smile playing on my lips when my phone rang. An unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Hello. Sammy. The voice was rough, hesitant. It was Gary. He was clearly calling from a blocked number to get around the restraining order. You are in violation of a court order, Gary, I said, my voice flat. I'm hanging up. Wait, please, he yelled, his voice cracking with a desperation I'd never heard before. Please I'm sorry, okay? I'm so sorry, I lost everything. Victoria's gone. The job sucks. I'm living in this tiny, awful room. I messed up. I know I messed up. Please, sis, can't we just go back? I stood in my quiet, peaceful house. I thought of the stolen money. I thought of his smirk. I thought of the years of sacrifice he'd so easily dismissed. And I thought of the 23 years of garnishment he had ahead of him. There is no back, Gary, I said, and my voice wasn't angry. It was just tired. This isn't a mistake you get to apologize for. This is who you are. You need to learn to live with your choices. I am learning to live with mine. I ended the call. And then I did something I should have done a long time ago. I blocked the unknown number. I turned off my phone. I zipped up my suitcase, walked out my front door, and drove to the airport. I didn't look back.